My uncle tried to S-botage my adoption when I was 7 years old, claiming someone from my mom's side was dangerous. At the court hearing, he pointed at a stranger and said, "That's him." The judge froze. "That man died 5 years ago," she whispered. My new parents looked at me, then at him. What happened next changed everything. I was 7 years old when my uncle tried to destroy my future. I didn't know it at the time, of course. At that age, you don't really understand things like court hearings and legal battles. All I knew was that I was sitting in a big room that smelled like old books and coffee, my feet swinging off the edge of a wooden chair that was too tall for me. My soon-to-be mother, Rachel, sat on one side, holding my hand so tightly it almost hurt. My soon-to-be father, David, was on my other side, his back straight, his jaw clenched. Across the room sat my uncle, Michael Whitman, my real mother's brother. The only blood relative I had left who gave a damn about where I ended up. At least, that's what he always said. He'd spent the last several months fighting my adoption, throwing up every legal roadblock he could find. He claimed it wasn't about me, that he was just trying to do the right thing. That's what he told the judge. What he told me. I had almost believed him. Until that day. Because that was the day he stood up in the middle of the hearing, his voice shaking, and said something that made the whole courtroom go silent. "Your Honor, I have proof that this adoption cannot proceed," Uncle Michael declared, his face red with anger. Or fear, maybe both. Judge Calloway, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a bun, fixed him with a cold stare. She had been through this before with him. We all had. "Mr. Whitman, you have already raised your concerns," she said, her voice even. "The court has reviewed your objections, and we are prepared to move forward with the adoption hearing today." "You don't understand," he insisted. His voice wavered, but it was loud, desperate. "There is someone dangerous in her bloodline. I can't let her be adopted without addressing it." David shifted beside me. I felt his tension, even though he didn't say anything. Rachel squeezed my hand harder. Judge Calloway sighed. "Mr. Whitman, if you have new evidence, present it now. Otherwise, I am moving forward." Uncle Michael turned, lifting his arm. His hand was shaking. "That man," he said. "Right there." He was pointing to someone in the back of the courtroom. I turned, my small heart pounding for reasons I didn't understand. My eyes followed his finger. There was a man sitting alone, near the door. He was tall, his skin pale, his face sharp and gaunt. His dark eyes were hollow, almost lifeless. He didn't react to my uncle pointing at him. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, watching. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Calloway's expression changed. The color drained from her face, and for the first time since I had met her, she looked unsettled. "Mr. Whitman," she said slowly. "Who are you pointing at?" "The man in the back," Uncle Michael said. "That's him. That's—" His voice cut off when he saw her face. Judge Calloway turned to look at the man again. She studied him for a long moment. The tension in the room was suffocating. Then she turned back to my uncle. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "That man died 5 years ago." The silence that followed was the kind that made your ears ring. I felt Rachel's grip tighten on my hand, her body going rigid beside me. David let out a sharp breath, his eyes darting toward the back of the courtroom again. Uncle Michael just stood there, frozen. I don't understand," he stammered. "He's right there. Look at him." Judge Calloway's eyes were cold now. "Mr. Whitman, that is a very serious claim. The man you are referring to, if I am not mistaken, was pronounced dead in 2002. There is no possible way he is in this courtroom." "But Uncle Michael's voice cracked. His face was pale, his hands shaking. People in the courtroom were whispering now. Some turned to look at the man. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A bailiff stepped forward, glancing toward the back as if preparing to intervene. I turned again, my small fingers curling into the fabric of Rachel's sleeve. The man in the back was still watching. He didn't move, didn't blink. His face was expressionless. Judge Calloway lifted a hand. "Bailiff, please escort the man in question out of the courtroom for identification." The bailiff hesitated, then nodded and walked toward the back. I couldn't breathe. The entire room was waiting, frozen, as the bailiff reached the last row. I watched, my heart hammering. But the moment the bailiff reached out, the man was gone. No one saw him stand up. No one saw him leave. He was just gone. Rachel gasped. David's arm went rigid around my shoulder. The bailiff spun around, scanning the room, his expression somewhere between confused and alarmed. "Where?" He turned back to the judge. "He's gone, Your Honor." He was just here." The whispers grew louder. Judge Calloway's face was unreadable. I looked at Uncle Michael. He was still staring at the empty seat, his face ashen, his mouth slightly open. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Maybe he had. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs. "We will take a recess." And just like that, everything changed. Because from that moment on, my adoption was no longer about custody. It was about something far more dangerous. The courtroom emptied faster than I had ever seen a room clear before. Lawyers, clerks, and spectators whispered amongst themselves, some glancing over their shoulders as they shuffled out the doors. The bailiff stayed behind. his face tense as he spoke in hushed tones to Judge Calloway. Rachel and David hadn't moved. Neither had Uncle Michael. I felt Rachel's hand tremble slightly as it held mine. David finally let out a slow breath and leaned toward her. "Did you see him leave?" His voice was low, almost hesitant. "No," Rachel whispered. "1 second he was there, and then he wasn't." David's grip tightened on my shoulder protectively. I looked at Uncle Michael. He hadn't said a word since the judge had called for a recess. His hands were gripping the table in front of him, his knuckles bone white. Then he whispered. He was right there. Judge Calloway stood up from the bench and motioned to the bailiff, who immediately came over. "Find out who was sitting in that chair," she said quietly. "Yes, Your Honor." The bailiff moved toward the door, but before he could leave, Uncle Michael turned sharply toward the judge. "You saw him," he said. His voice was strained. "You saw him just like I did." Judge Calloway didn't answer immediately. Her expression remained carefully composed, but the way she held herself, shoulders squared, hands tense, told me that whatever had just happened had shaken her. Finally, she spoke. "We'll discuss this after recess." Rachel and David guided me into the hallway, keeping close. Other people from the courtroom stood in clusters, whispering. The air felt thick with tension. Rachel knelt in front of me and tucked a piece of my hair behind my ear. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I nodded, but my stomach felt strange, like I had swallowed something heavy. David exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "That wasn't normal," he muttered. Before Rachel could respond, Uncle Michael stormed out of the courtroom. His face was still pale, but now there was something else in his expression. Something harder. Anger. He marched straight toward us. "You saw it too," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Tell me you saw him." Rachel stood up and took a step in front of me. "I saw someone," she admitted. "But I don't know who." "It was him," Michael cut in. His hands were shaking. "It was him." David's jaw tightened. "The judge said that man died 5 years ago." "I know what she said." Michael's voice rose slightly. "I don't care what she said. He was sitting right there." Rachel placed a hand on David's arm, trying to calm him before things escalated. "Michael," she said carefully. "Who was he?" Michael's mouth opened, but no words came out. His face twitched slightly, like he was struggling to force something out that he didn't want to say. Then, finally, he whispered, "My sister's husband." Rachel inhaled sharply. David's expression darkened. "Your brother-in-law?" Michael nodded stiffly. "His name was Elijah. He married my sister when she was 19. They had problems." He swallowed hard. "And then he died." A chill ran down my spine. Rachel spoke slowly. "If he died, then what did we see?" Michael's eyes darted toward the empty courtroom doors, his face tight. "I don't know," he muttered. "But I'm going to find out." That evening, Rachel and David took me home, but there was an unease hanging over us like a heavy cloud. I was sitting on the couch, watching cartoons, when I heard them whispering in the kitchen. "I don't like this," Rachel was saying. "Something about it feels wrong." "You think?" David muttered. "Michael's been talking about someone dangerous in her family for months. Now he claims he saw a dead man. And then poof, the guy vanishes into thin air." "I'm not saying I believe him," Rachel said. "But I did see that man." David sighed. "Yeah, me too." There was a pause. Then Rachel said, "What if he's right?" David didn't answer. I turned back to my cartoons, hugging my knees to my chest. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing. For the first time since my adoption process had started, I was scared. The next day, Uncle Michael called. "I need to see you," he said. His voice was strained. "All of you." Rachel hesitated but eventually agreed. When we arrived at his apartment, he had papers spread across his coffee table. Old photographs, newspaper clippings, things that looked worn, like they had been handled 1,000 times. David narrowed his eyes. "What's all this?" Michael sat down heavily. "Proof." He pushed a newspaper clipping toward them. Rachel picked it up. Her eyes skimmed the headline. Then she paled. David took it from her hands and read it aloud. "Elijah Carter found dead in apartment fire. Suspected arson." The article was old, dated 5 years ago. I stared at the grainy black and white photo of a man beneath the headline. It was him. It was the man in the courtroom. Rachel looked at Michael. "What does this mean?" Michael swallowed. "It means someone is lying." David frowned. "Who?" Michael hesitated. Then he said, "I don't know." But the way his voice wavered made me think that maybe he did. Maybe he had known all along. Michael's apartment felt stuffy, like the walls were holding in something unspoken. The air smelled like old paper and coffee gone cold. Rachel and David sat on the worn-out couch, their bodies tense, while I perched on the edge of a chair, my legs dangling. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he spread out more newspaper clippings, old photographs, and what looked like court records. His breathing was uneven. David was the first to break the silence. "Let's start with the basics," he said, his voice low. He pointed at the newspaper article. "This says Elijah died in a fire. If that's true, then how the HLL did we all see him in that courtroom yesterday?" Michael swallowed hard. "I don't know." Rachel crossed her arms. "You must have some idea." Michael hesitated. Then, reluctantly, He picked up a faded photograph from the pile and slid it toward them. It was a picture of a younger Michael, standing beside a woman who looked like an older version of me, my mother. And standing next to her was the man from the courtroom. Rachel's breath caught. That's him. Michael nodded stiffly. That's Elijah. My sister married him when she was 19. She had you a year later. He glanced at me, his face tight. At first, everything seemed fine. But after a while, she started distancing herself from the family. She wouldn't answer my calls, wouldn't visit. And when she did talk to me, she sounded off. I stared at my mother's face in the photo. I barely remembered her. Just flashes, her brushing my hair, humming to herself in the kitchen, tucking me in at night. David frowned. Off how? Michael exhaled. She was scared. Rachel's expression darkened. Of Elijah? Michael nodded. I shifted in my seat, my stomach twisting. Michael tapped the newspaper article again. Then one day, we got the news. Their apartment burned down with Elijah inside. They found his body in the wreckage. His voice was strained. My sister was gone. Silence stretched between us. Rachel was the first to speak. Are you saying she set the fire? Michael shook his head quickly. No. I don't know. The official report said it was arson, but no one was ever charged. David leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. But if he died, then who? What did we see in that courtroom? Michael opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because he didn't know. None of us did. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Rachel and David tried to pretend everything was fine, but I could hear their hushed voices in the kitchen after we got home. They thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. Something felt wrong. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke up to the sound of knocking. It was soft at first. A quiet tap, tap, tap at the front door. Then it got louder. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, my chest tight. It was late. Too late for anyone to be at the door. I climbed out of bed, my bare feet silent against the wooden floor. From the hallway, I could see the faint glow of the porch light filtering through the window. Another knock. I heard footsteps behind me. Rachel appeared, her robe wrapped tightly around her, her face pale. David was right behind her. Stay here, she whispered. I clutched the edge of my nightshirt, my body frozen. David approached the door slowly, his shoulders tense. He reached for the knob, and then the knocking stopped. The porch light flickered. Rachel held her breath. David hesitated, then pulled the door open. No one was there. But sitting on the welcome mat was an old, charred photograph. Rachel picked it up with shaking fingers and turned it over. It was a picture of my mother. And Elijah. And written in black ink beneath it were 4 words. She never should have run. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. David grabbed the photo and looked around the porch. The street was empty, silent except for the hum of a distant street lamp. No cars. No movement. Whoever had been knocking was gone. Michael's warning echoed in my head. There is someone dangerous in her bloodline. I gripped the fabric of my nightshirt even tighter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just scared. I was terrified. The next morning, David and Rachel took the photo straight to Michael. He held it for a long time, his face unreadable. Then he whispered, I was right. Rachel exhaled sharply. Right about what? Michael lifted his gaze. His eyes looked haunted. Someone is trying to stop this adoption. Someone who doesn't want her with you. David clenched his jaw. But why? Michael hesitated. Then, finally, he said, because of Elijah. Rachel frowned. But he's dead. Michael's hands curled into fists. Is he? Silence. Michael leaned forward, his voice lowering. I don't know what we saw in that courtroom, but if Elijah is alive, if he faked his death, then he will come back for her. My stomach twisted. Rachel put a protective arm around me. That's not going to happen. Michael exhaled shakily. You don't understand. If Elijah isn't alive, then something else is happening. David crossed his arms. Like what? Michael's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. But the fear in his eyes said he had a guess. And it was something he wasn't ready to say out loud. Later that night, David made a decision. We need proof, he said. If someone was at our house last night, there has to be security footage from the neighbors. Rachel agreed. So David went to our next-door neighbor, Mr. Henderson, an older man who had a security camera facing the street. Mr. Henderson was more than happy to help. He pulled up the footage from the night before, rewinding to the time we heard the knocking. We all crowded around the small screen as the video played. At 2:13 a.m., the porch light flickered. A shadow moved just outside the frame. Then, knocking. David tensed. Rachel gripped my hand. Then, slowly, a figure stepped into view. A man. Tall. Thin. Gaunt. His face was just out of the camera's range, shrouded in darkness. Rachel inhaled sharply. David clenched his fists. Pause it. Mr. Henderson froze the frame. The figure stood just outside our front door, motionless. And then, as we all stared at the screen, his head turned. And for a split second, the camera caught his face. I felt the blood drain from my body. Because it was him. It was Elijah. Rachel's breath came out in a shudder. But that's impossible. David's face was pale. Michael whispered the words we were all thinking. If that's Elijah, then who the HLL did they bury 5 years ago? Nobody spoke for a long time. We all just stood there in Mr. Henderson's dimly lit living room, staring at the grainy black and white image frozen on the screen. The man standing at our front door had the same sharp features, the same hollow eyes, the same sunken cheeks as the man we had seen in the courtroom. Elijah. But that was impossible. David finally exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his hair. There has to be another explanation. Rachel shook her head, her face pale. Like what? David didn't answer. He couldn't. Michael leaned closer to the screen, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. Can you zoom in? He asked Mr. Henderson. The old man hesitated but nodded and adjusted the settings. The image flickers slightly before zooming in on the man's face. And then something strange happened. The footage blurred. Not like regular pixelation. This was different. It was as if the camera itself had refused to focus on his features, like the moment the image sharpened, something distorted it. Michael muttered a curse. That's not normal. Rachel wrapped her arms around herself, shaking her head. None of this is normal. I swallowed hard, my chest tight. What does this mean? I asked quietly. Nobody answered. David sighed and straightened up. We need to take this to the police. Michael tensed. And tell them what? That a dead man is knocking on our door. David shot him a look. You think they won't believe us? Michael let out a humorless laugh. I think they'll call a psychiatrist before they call a detective. Rachel rubbed her temples. Then what do we do? Michael stared at the screen for another long moment before exhaling. We find out the truth ourselves. Michael had contacts. Over the next few days, he started making phone calls. Old friends, investigators, even a former detective he knew. He dug up reports, autopsy records, fire department statements, anything he could find about Elijah's supposed death. And the more he found, the worse it got. The fire was ruled arson. He told us one evening as we all sat around our dining table. But get this, the body they pulled from the wreckage was burned beyond recognition. David frowned. So they confirmed it was Elijah through dental records? Michael hesitated. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Michael. He let out a slow breath. That's just it. The records were inconclusive. David sat up straighter. What? Michael pulled out a manila folder and slid a report across the table. The fire destroyed most of the body's identifying features. The coroner used partial dental records and circumstantial evidence to conclude it was Elijah, but there was never a 100% confirmation. Rachel paled. You're saying they guessed? Michael nodded. Pretty much. My stomach twisted. David rubbed his hands over his face. So you're telling me there's a real possibility that Elijah never died in that fire? Michael leaned forward. I think someone wanted us to believe he died. Rachel whispered. But why? Michael's jaw tightened. Because if Elijah is still alive, he's been hiding for 5 years. And now, for some reason, he's back. David's voice was grim. And he's watching us. That night, the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Rachel sat up so fast in bed that she nearly fell out. David grabbed the baseball bat he kept beside the nightstand and marched to the front door. This time, he didn't hesitate. He yanked the door open. No one was there. But something was left behind. A box. Small. Wooden. With my mother's name carved into the lid. David and Rachel exchanged a look before carefully picking it up and bringing it inside. I stood behind them, my heart pounding as they set it on the kitchen table. Michael arrived within minutes after Rachel called him. His face was tight as he studied the box. I don't like this, he muttered. David took a deep breath and flipped open the lid. Inside was a single object. A cassette tape. No label. No markings. Just an old, dusty tape sitting at the bottom of the wooden box. Rachel covered her mouth with her hand. That's... Michael nodded. Yeah, that's old. David exhaled. We need a tape player. We found one in the attic. An old, dusty cassette player from before I was born. David carefully placed the tape inside and pressed play. For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, a voice. A woman's voice. My mother's voice. If you're hearing this, something went wrong. Rachel gasped. Michael's hands clenched into fists. The recording continued. I don't have much time. If Elijah is still out there, he's looking for me. I tried to run, but I don't know if I got far enough. If something happens to me, please, protect her. Rachel grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted any of this. But it's too late now. Elijah isn't who you think he is. He's something else. Something wrong. The audio crackled, distorting her voice. Then she whispered, if he finds her, it's over. The tape cut to silence. A long, suffocating silence. I couldn't breathe. Rachel wiped a tear from her cheek. David swallowed hard. Michael's face was unreadable, but his voice was steady when he finally spoke. This isn't just about the adoption anymore, he said. This is about keeping her alive. And for the first time in my life, I saw true fear in his eyes. After that night, things escalated. We weren't just being watched anymore. We were being hunted. Lights flickered at odd hours. Shadows moved where no one should have been. The knocking became more frequent, sometimes soft, sometimes relentless. Then the phone call started. Rachel answered the first one. She barely said, "Hello," before she turned white and dropped the phone. David grabbed it. Static, just like the tape. Then, deep within the static, a voice whispered, "She belongs to me." David slammed the phone down. Michael started carrying a GN. Rachel didn't let me out of her sight. And every night, I lay awake, listening, waiting, because I knew, deep down, that Elijah wasn't going to stop. Not until he had me. Elijah was closing in. The phone calls didn't stop. The knocking became more frequent, sometimes coming from the windows instead of the front door. The security cameras caught shadows moving just outside their range. Tall, thin, deliberate. Michael barely slept. David double-checked the locks so often that the door handle became loose. Rachel hovered near me constantly, her eyes darting toward every creak of the house. Then, one night, he finally spoke to me. It was late. The house was silent except for the occasional rustle of wind through the trees outside. I had woken up, feeling strange, restless. A weight sat heavy on my chest, an invisible pressure that made it hard to breathe. Then I heard it. A whisper. "Come outside." I froze. I wasn't sure if I had imagined it. Maybe it was a dream. But then, "Come outside, little one." The voice was low, rough, and yet almost soothing. I sat up slowly, my hands gripping the blankets. My pulse pounded in my ears. The whisper came again, right outside my window this time. "I just want to see you." I squeezed my eyes shut. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I screamed. The lights snapped on. David and Rachel came running, Michael close behind. Rachel rushed to my side, pulling me into her arms. "What happened? What's wrong?" I pointed to the window, my voice shaking. "He's outside." David and Michael bolted toward the door. Rachel held me close as I buried my face in her shoulder. I heard the front door fly open. The sound of heavy footsteps running across the porch. A sharp curse from David. Then silence. When Michael and David came back inside, their faces were pale. David locked the door behind them. Rachel tightened her hold on me. "Did you see him?" Michael swallowed. "No." David turned toward me, his expression serious. "But he left something." He held up a single slip of paper. It was old, yellowed at the edges. Written in neat, precise handwriting was a single sentence. "She is mine by blood. You cannot keep her." Rachel's hands clenched into fists. Michael exhaled sharply. "That's it," he muttered. "I'm done playing his game." Michael wanted revenge, but not in the way most people would expect. "I don't want to KLL him," he said the next morning, his voice cold. "I want to expose him. I want to take away the one thing he wants most, control." David nodded grimly. "How?" Michael grabbed his phone and started dialing. "By proving, once and for all, that Elijah Carter doesn't exist." Michael spent the next few days reaching out to contacts. A private investigator, a friend at the courthouse, a journalist. Then, finally, he got what he needed. Proof. Rachel, David, and I sat in the living room as Michael laid it all out. Elijah Carter, he said, tapping a file on the table, was officially pronounced dead in 2002. That's on record. Which means whoever is out there can't be him. Rachel frowned. "But we saw him, Michael." Michael's jaw tightened. "No. We saw someone who looked like him." David narrowed his eyes. "What are you saying?" Michael exhaled. "I'm saying that the man stalking us isn't Elijah. He never was." The room fell silent. Then Rachel whispered, "Then who is he?" Michael slid a photograph across the table. "His brother." Elijah had a twin, Michael explained. "His name was Samuel Carter." David's brows furrowed. "But why would he?" "Because he's been obsessed with the idea that Elijah's family belonged to him," Michael interrupted. "I talked to an old neighbor from back then. She said Samuel always resented Elijah. He thought my sister stole him from their family." Rachel's face paled. "So when the fire happened," Michael nodded, "Elijah really did die. But Samuel saw it as his chance. He let people believe he had died instead." I shivered. Michael clenched his fists. "And now, after all these years, he's come back to finish what he thinks was taken from him." David leaned back in his chair. "That explains why the security footage was so blurry. It wasn't supernatural. It was just a bad resolution on an old camera. And the judge wasn't seeing a ghost. She was just shocked because he looked exactly like the man she remembered from years ago." Rachel rubbed her temples. "But that still doesn't explain why he wants her." She gestured toward me. Michael's eyes darkened. "Because to him, she's the last piece of Elijah's life he never got to claim." A heavy silence fell over the room. Then Rachel took a deep breath and stood. "Then let's make sure he never gets another chance." We had everything we needed: documents, photos, legal records. All we had to do was draw him out. So we did. Michael contacted the journalist he knew and arranged for a public announcement in the newspaper. Elijah Carter, declared dead in 2002, is alive. The article laid out the facts, the inconsistencies in the fire report, the conflicting records, a mention of an unknown twin brother, and, most importantly, it was published with Samuel's old address. A subtle message. "We know who you are." And just like that, the knocking stopped. The phone calls ended. The shadows disappeared. Samuel Carter vanished. A few weeks later, the adoption was finalized. Rachel and David officially became my parents. Michael, despite everything, was there. He stood beside me in the courtroom, his expression unreadable as the judge stamped the final paperwork. As we walked out of the courthouse, Rachel and David holding my hands, Michael exhaled. "It's over," he said. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. "It's finally over." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Months passed. Life settled. The fear faded. Then, one day, a letter arrived. No return address. Rachel hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single slip of paper. No threats. No demands. Just 5 simple words. "She was never yours, either." Rachel's hands shook. David took the letter and ripped it in half. Michael burned it. We never heard from him again. And that was fine by me. Because I had a family now. And he had nothing.